How you doing?
I'm all right. I've just spent the last 5 minutes trying to figure out the best place to sit matter.
I is it a whole I need to be comfortable for an hour, and that hasn't happened for quite some time now.
Oh, yeah, pretty much. I can't remember the last time that happened. Like every position that you sit in is just like, well, that's gone numb, or that's swollen up, or that's uncomfortable, but like worth it. But like I keep saying stuff like that, and people are like, you're allowed to like whinge, like the last few weeks of pregnancy are hard. But I'm like, eh, there's worse things. There's worse things. So you might just see me like this, wriggle and fidget a little bit every so often because I'm like trying to readjust my feet.
That's fine.
My feet are like how
Well,
shoes fit.
well, you are allowed to whinge about it, but you're also equally allowed to have the perspective that it's worth it because, obviously, as we're going to get into your story, um, it's been a little bit of time getting to here, and it's been slightly more than 9 months to get you to this point, right? Slightly.
Just yeah, just slightly. Yeah, just a while. Um, it does make me laugh. Things like so obviously with IVF, um, it, it adds a little bit onto the front, just a
Right.
little bit.
Yeah.
Most people it's about 6 weeks. With us it was about July, August, September, October. It was 4 months. Um, so a few people have started asking the question, oh, is there anything that you missed? Is there anything that you like really can't wait to have? And my sister turned around and was like, oh, I never had that. Like, I was never bothered by anything. I was like, yes, because you gave it up for 7 months. I've already given up everything for a year because when you start treatment, they tell you to just treat your body as if it's pregnant. So I'm like, I just want some brie. I want some prawns. I want some chorizo, but like parma ham. And she was like, okay. All
So
right,
basically, we're
Tom.
going for some charcuterie after all this, then.
I've already got the cheese and charcuterie board booked in, like it's getting delivered. It's happening. It's happening. I'm all over that.
Amazing. So, in typical Dave way, I've started the interview before I started the interview. So let's like rewind a second. And who is Amy West?
Me.
For everyone that doesn't know you as well as I do.
So background, I am a personal trainer, fitness instructor. But I came at it from a different angle to a lot of PTs in that I was very well, this bit's not a different angle, but I was very overweight at a young age, struggled with my body image, my body size, and I went to Weight Watchers. I went from about 113 kilos to about 60, no, somewhere around there. So I lost like half of my body weight essentially, then got really into fitness, developed an eating disorder, so went like the other side of the spectrum. Did 10 months traveling with my now husband where it got really bad. When we came back, I started to work with a PT. I learned more about nutrition, macros, and just absolutely loved the way that I felt when I was exercising and wanted other people to have access to that. And that's why I went into PT. But then actually my relationship with food didn't get any better because I got locked into the macro side of it. And now I've 3 years on, I'm a very different personal trainer to the one that started out. I was very much like calories in versus calories out and, sweating it out. And now I'm just like, you move your body to feel good. It doesn't matter how you look. It's all about feeling good. You nourish your body in a way that feels good to you because it is true health at every size. It doesn't matter the size of your body. You could be a size 6 or a size 26. It really doesn't matter because there have been times in my life where I've been really happy, and there's been times in my life where I've been really miserable, and none of them have been impacted more than by the size of my body. I've been more miserable in a smaller body, and I know that I'm very privileged to say that I've got a smaller body, but I have had more hang-ups and been more miserable about having a smaller body than I was in a bigger body. And I think when you have had an eating disorder, you are a lot more self-critical of the way that you look. So pregnancy has been very interesting for that, because people feel like they've got free rein to comment on your body all of the time, comment on what you're eating, comment on, like, even my workouts. I've done a pre and postnatal qualification, and I know people say it because they're concerned, but they're like, oh, should you be doing that? Well, I kind of know my own body and how to move it. So that's been interesting. But what happened was, back in 2018, we decided that we wanted to try and get pregnant. So I came off the contraceptive pill, and I didn't get my periods back. Immediately started to blame myself, started to blame my eating disorder, started to blame my exercise, because there is something called Red syndrome, which is basically a link between over-exercise and under-eating. And I just thought, basically, I've done this to my own body. Fast forward a year and a half, and I actually found out I've got polycystic ovaries, which just doesn't cause infertility for everyone. It can cause fertility problems. But with me, it just means that I don't ovulate at all, which does explain a lot of the links with my mental health, with my body weight, because I've always found it, I've always had to eat that little bit less than everybody else to kind of maintain a lower body weight. Very common with polycystic ovaries. Even things like my hair thins really easily, and we thought that was when we went travelling, it was to do with the water and to do with medications. But actually, when we look back, all of the things that started to happen around that time are all linked to polycystic ovaries, and they all kicked in about the same time. So it's been a really big learning curve. And over the past 2 years, I sort of transitioned that when I first started as a PT, I would train anybody. And then I've kind of transitioned to be a female-only trainer. My classes are open to everyone. But the reason I started to just train females is because when I did my pre- and postnatal qualification, things like the hormonal differences, even the physical changes that women go through in pregnancy, it's just fascinated me, and that's more the kind of route that I'm going down now. And post baby, I want to say when I have time, I would like to. I'm looking into doing more qualifications so that I can understand that better. But it has been a hell of a journey, and a really long 3 years.
So you said, like, you know, there was a few sort of key points there, and you like fast forward from there to there a year and a half later. I kind of want to rewind to the point at which when you first said that your period wasn't coming back. And this is a very weird interview for me because I know all the answers to all of these questions, and it's like, how much am I breaking client confidentiality by even asking you these things? But we did have obviously a conversation beforehand about, you said, just go for it. So if anyone in the chat thinks that I'm asking super insensitive questions, it's just because I kind of know where I'm going quicker than I do with most people. Would you mind talking us through sort of what that did for your own mindset and mental health at that stage when you kind of were first blaming yourself?
Oh, it was horrific. And I think with infertility, as soon as the biggest problem is they always test the woman. So it wasn't until we were months and months down the line that they actually did any kind of check on my husband. It's always the assumption that the woman is the problem, which therefore puts the onus on you and the pressure on you straight away. So they couldn't actually find anything. They went in at first, and I had scans, both internal and external, about a year into the process. I went in for keyhole surgery so that they could check to see if they could find any endometriosis or polycystic ovaries. They couldn't find anything, which just kind of furthered my idea that this is me, this is my problem. And it's a catch-22 as well. So when you're, for me, I deal very like fine in the day-to-day with my nutrition, my food, that kind of thing. When I'm under a lot of stress and a lot of strain, the one thing I can control is my food. It's the only thing I can control. So when I was stressed and thinking, this is all my fault, I need to eat better, I need to exercise, I couldn't physically, in my brain, it was telling me this is what you need to do. But the only way that I could cope was to keep my body moving and to really restrict my food. So it was two sides of the same coin, like battling each other, and that was really horrendous. And I found it really hard because you feel so much guilt as well. Like you're sitting there and you know how desperately you want it, which therefore you know how desperately your partner wants it, and it was we'd already we delayed because trying to have kids because I was the one that said, I want to get my business up and running. I want to have. We'd only got married the year before, and we'd had a whirlwind couple of years. I mean, we'd gone traveling in 2015. We bought the house in 2016. We got married in 2017. So I was like, I don't want to immediately kind of get married and then be trying to open a business and be trying to get and all of this. So I was like, initially when I came off the pill, it was just going to be like, we'll see what happens. It might not, but but then as soon as your period doesn't come back, that's the worry. You've got worry like plugged in straight away. So it was probably the lowest I've ever been. And then mixing the fact that they put me onto they put me onto a drug which is supposed to kickstart your period. Now, for anyone that has ever been through IVF or been through infertility issues, it's a standard. They will put you on this drug for 3 rounds. If it doesn't work your first round, they double the dose. If it doesn't work your second round, they triple the dose. And if it doesn't work in the third round, that's when it takes you to IVF or IUI or some sort of intervention. They put me on the first round, and honestly, I felt like hell. I kept just saying to my husband, I feel like I could walk out into the road in front of a bus, and it wasn't suicidal. It was because you feel so numb and so dull to the world. You just want something to make you feel.
Yeah.
And when I went back, it was like the hospital we were at. It was like being on a conveyor belt, and the consultant went, "Oh, have a look at your nose." Didn't even have a look at my nose before I walked in. "Oh, well, it hasn't worked, so we'll double your dose, and we'll see you in another 4 to 6 weeks and see how that's gone." So then I went back in 4 to 6 weeks, and she said exactly the same thing. "Oh, it hasn't worked, so we're going to..." And I burst out crying. I was like, I can't do it. I can't. I said, I just feel so horrendous. Like, I don't want to be here. Like, I can't even put into words. I kept saying, it's not like I want to be dead. I just don't want to be here. And that sounds so insane, but it's all you can do. It's the most numb feeling. And we were due to go to New York, and I've since said it was the most amazing trip, but it's the most zoned out and hazed out I've ever been in my life, and that really upsets me because I've waited. I'm obsessed with Christmas, so New York in December was like my ultimate, and just the anxiety, the frustration, the anger that you feel, and my poor husband, everything he's had to put up with. But it was just horrendous. But what actually happened was Someone we know works at an alternate hospital, and we hadn't said we were going down the fertility route, but they knew that I was getting investigated for all kinds of different things. And it was he's offered to put me in touch with a consultant who was on the gynecology and IVF unit. And I spoke to her, and within 5 minutes, she turned around and said to me, if you'd have described your symptoms to me after your first round and knowing that you'd been investigated for polycystic ovaries, I would never have put you through a second round. Never in a million years. 3 days later, I'd been referred to that hospital. My first appointment at that hospital, they diagnosed my polycystic ovaries. They literally did a scan, and the consultant went, so there you can see the cysts all around your ovaries. And I burst out crying, and the nurse was just totally couldn't understand what was going on. I was like, for the past 18 months, I've been told that I don't have this, because you don't necessarily need to see cysts on your ovaries to have it. There's a few different categories that you just need to tick.
Yeah.
And the hospital that I was at just didn't see the issues that I was having. And she was like, it's not your fault. And I was like, I thought it was all my fault. And she said, you know, it's genetic. It's not something you've done. It's not something you could change. It just is what it is. And it was just such a feeling of not even relief. It was just the intense emotion of knowing I haven't done this. I haven't caused this. It was like something had been lifted off me. And it didn't stop me from saying, you know, it's my fault that we're having these issues, because still, you know, I knew that it was me. But mentally, to know that there was a medical reason that we were struggling rather than something that I was physically doing to our body, it was a game changer, basically. And I'm glad that I kept fighting and I kept looking for an answer, and I didn't stick with the original doctors, the original hospital, because I do believe that if we were still there, there's no way I would be almost 38 weeks pregnant.
Amazing. Sorry, I'm just getting distracted by the fact that my wife's just walking past brushing her teeth, and I'm like just like that's it's not a manual toothbrush. It's very loud. It's like, I'm trying to listen at the same time, and hoping that no one on this thinks that I'm secretly using any other electronic device just off camera, because I always joke on stream that no one ever knows what I do from here down, because I'm usually fidgeting with things below the screen, which feels so. That how did they miss it in the first place? If the scan kind of showed it so obviously in the second instance, is there any explanation as to how it was missed the first time around?
There's been no explanation, but from what I can gather, so the pill is actually used as a treatment for polycystic ovaries. There's two problems with that. One is that it masks all of the symptoms of polycystic ovaries. So it's great if you know that you've got it, but if you don't know that you've got it, all of these symptoms that suddenly start showing up when you come off the pill. So maybe I didn't have cysts on my ovaries when I went for the initial scan because it was too close to when I came off.
Yeah.
But fast forward 18 months and everything was there. The second thing is, and I'm not saying this is a certainty, but there is a high likelihood that if I'd never been on the pill, I could have got into my mid to late 30s without polycystic ovaries developing, because there's again been research that the pill speeds up the onset of polycystic ovaries.
Right.
So we've kind of pinpointed it at about 24, 25 when all of my symptoms started to show without actually knowing what it was, and always finding other reasons for it. So, like my hair thinning, well, we were in Cambodia and we were taking malaria tablets, or when we came back from traveling, I had what I thought was IBS, when actually you do tend to get a lot more bowel, stomach problems with polycystic ovaries as well. That's being found. Um, all of my A lot of people with polycystic ovaries have issues with food, and that usually stems from the fact that there's massive weight implications with it.
Yeah.
Um, and then that impacts on your mental health. But I think if you're predisposed to have mental health problems anyway, which run in my family, just automatically assume that. So it's almost like you could always find a reason for having something, but if you don't put them all together, then that's why. And to be in a hospital where the consultant or the doctor or the nurse doesn't even know why you're there until you walk in the room and they're handed a file, you can kind of see why it's missed. Whereas when we changed hospitals, the difference in care, the quality was just unbelievable, to the point where the nurses all know your name. There was only sort of 5 or 6 nurses who worked on the IVF unit, and the day we went in for our last appointment, where we were having our sign off, the nurse who was with us went out to get us some meds, and there was a knock at the door, and another nurse came in and just turned around and said, "Oh, I just knew you were in. Someone told me you were in. I needed to come and say congratulations. I'm so happy for you. I can't wait. I can't wait to see the baby." And everybody is so involved. And then when you signed off from the IVF unit and you go over to maternity, you can still be registered to the IVF unit. So when I give birth, I'll have an IVF consultant rather than just having a general consultant in the hospital.
Okay.
You get extra checks all the way through. And they're so caring that they will say, if you've got any questions, give us a ring at any time, and like literally anything you want, to the point where we suffered. I know we lost my husband's dad really suddenly in the middle of treatment, and it was just horrendous. And we actually got a phone call one day from the hospital, and they'd had to put my treatment on pause for totally different reasons, like my body wasn't responding to meds and things. And it was one of the nurses checking in, and she literally had rang to check in to see how I was, but not only to see how I was, she wanted to know how my husband was, and then started asking how my mother-in-law was.
Oh.
And it's like, yeah, it's total difference in care. So I think it and people can say, some trusts are way busier than others, and there's always a reason and things like that. But I think every single trust has been through hell this year. We were in the middle of COVID. Like, they were all run ragged, but it's taken the time to know and care about your patients. Exactly the same with PT. Exactly the same with any other job. It's the difference between being on that conveyor belt, or it's the difference between actually getting to know somebody, and it just made that massive difference.
Yeah. In terms of COVID coming along, that was quite disruptive to the whole to the treatment, and kind of put things back just as you were kind of seeing the goalposts within sight. Is that am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, that was pretty hard, and I think it took a while to sink in as well, because obviously I run my own business. So my immediate thought when everything was happening was, well, I need to think about the business first. So that's what came first. And I went online, and everything transitioned. I want to say really smoothly, but obviously a few bumps in the road. And then we didn't know how long it was going to go on for. And we just got the phone call to say everything was being shut down. And I think in my head, I just went, yeah, okay, that's where we've got to be. But then after sort of the whole first 7 weeks, when it kept getting extended and getting extended, there was just one day where it suddenly sunk in, and I was like, we've been waiting for this for nigh on 2 years now, and it's still not happened, and we're still waiting for this treatment, and that was really, really difficult. We were really lucky because obviously it was a priority list. So as soon as things started up again, we were one of the first to get treatment. We were lucky in the fact that our treatment, when we first went in, we were put to the top of the list because they pretty much said to us, we don't see any other way that you conceive. Normally, you have to wait 2 years before they'll put you forward for IVF, but we were only at the 18-month mark. But because they knew if there's something there that's pre-existing and they say there's no other way, then you have a reason to just go for it.
Yeah.
But as I say, ours was a bumpy road, because every time they put me onto some meds, the meds didn't work, and it's very hard in that you have to go back every few days to scans. And in COVID, you had to do it alone.
Yeah.
So every time I was going for an appointment, in the appointment, I was told it hasn't worked. We're going to up your dosage. We'll find the right one, because your first round of IVF is very much trial and error. They don't know how your body is going to respond. But the drugs that they put you on with having polycystic ovaries, what they're trying to do is to get your body to produce, essentially, to produce eggs. But what can happen is something called hyperstimulation. So it can go from like nothing to a lot, and that can be really, really damaging for you. So they've got to be really careful with how they up the dose. Naturally, they had to put me on the highest dose because my body just like, it just doesn't listen to anything, does it? So eventually I did end up on the highest dose. But that was like going back every 2 days for about 2.5 weeks. And every time I went back, I then got the bad news, and then I had to ring my husband and repeat everything that I said. And I was in such a haze because you're on so many different medications anyway, that you kind of, they always say you get baby brain before you get baby brain. But also, they're throwing so much information at you. Sometimes I just wished I'd got my phone out and recorded what they were saying, because he'd then asked me what they'd said, and I'd just not even know.
Yeah.
So that was really difficult. So I really feel for anybody that's been through it, or even just being pregnant during COVID. We were really lucky that he was allowed, because it was a small unit, he was allowed to come in. You have extra scans with IVF, so we had 6-week and 9-week scans, so he got to come in for those. We actually had a really bad scare 5 days after they told me I was pregnant. I had a massive bleed. I thought I'd lost the baby. They did tests and they said my hormone levels are still rising, but it was very much, I didn't believe that things were okay until we went for that 6-week scan, and you see the physical heartbeat at 6 weeks. It's insane. It's crazy. So it was just incredible. But because it had taken the meds so long to kind of work, the lining of my womb wasn't thick enough, which means that they couldn't put anything into implant.
Right.
Which is why I had to have that break in between. And it was very hard in that it was hard anyway, but my father-in-law died on the Sunday, and we got told everything was being put on pause on the Monday. So it's something that is so intense anyway, it just felt even more intense. But in hindsight, that gave us time to that just gave us time that we needed, because the amount of drugs that you're on, hormones that you're filled with, there's no way we could have been happy about what was happening because of everything else that was going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very, very, very intense. And I would say to anybody going through it, we're the minority. We were really lucky that it worked first time around. But to put it into perspective, if they took their time with it, and I think you always want it to just rush through, and you want to just get through the treatment and imagine that it's going to happen, but it doesn't work like that. I think most people stay pessimistic for their first round, because if you're pessimistic, there's nothing to lose. But if you're optimistic, then there's everything to lose. And I listened to everything that they said. So everything they told me to cut out, I cut out. Everything that they told me to eat, I ate. Which that was really difficult for me. Particularly having a glass of whole milk every day. Oh, that was vile. But there has been a link between that and successful IVF rates, apparently. And weirdly, I know 2 other people who've had IVF who followed that rule, who got pregnant first time round. So it's absolutely bizarre. But yeah, it's a tough process, but entirely worth it.
So throughout all of that, like, how, when you said, you're getting told every 2 days, and there was like, this hasn't worked or it's not taken, and obviously before that you had the sort of the hormonal changes that were taking weeks at a time, and it was like, this hasn't worked. It's like, how did you kind of handle hearing this hasn't worked so much?
Oh, with great difficulty. It was incredibly hard. And again, COVID made it a lot harder, because we didn't have that support system. You couldn't have that support system. It was good in a way when our treatment landed, that it was when things had eased up a little bit, so we could see a little bit more of family and friends. But at the same time, it's such an isolating feeling that you don't want to. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to spend time with anybody, because it sounds awful. But everybody I know, all of my closest friends, have children, and it was so hard to see them with their kids. One of the hardest things was my husband's sister announced she was pregnant while we were going through treatment, and that in itself is one of the hardest emotions to go through, because you're so happy for someone, but you're so angry at the same time. Like, you're so mad, because it's frustrating as to, well, why could you just click your fingers and fall pregnant? And what happens is, you talk to a lot of people, and it doesn't happen like that for a lot of people, but it does feel like that's all that's happening around you when you're going through it. I know so many people now who have told me about their experiences with infertility, with miscarriage, with IVF, with investigations, with just all kinds of things. And they're things that we don't talk about, and we need to talk about them, because if you feel like you're going through it alone, which you genuinely do, it's a much harder process. I was lucky in that one of my friends was going through it, but that's also difficult, because you kind of don't want to talk to each other too much about it, because you're worried. She actually fell pregnant while we were still going through treatment. She's got a little boy now, which is lovely. Little James is 2 months old. And she'd been, she'd actually had a round, lost a baby, and then had a second round, and now she's got a little boy. But it was incredibly hard to talk to her about it because I knew she was further on in the process. So she waited until I had my news to be like, well, actually, we're 12 weeks pregnant. And again, that's really difficult because it's like you feel like you can't be honest and open with everybody. And even when we found out, we didn't really tell anybody, and we didn't really get excited until about the 20-week mark because you're just so scared. I think it's a constant thing of it's taken you so long that at first you don't really believe it. And then when you do start to believe it, it's too scary to be excited or happy about it because what if something goes wrong? Something could always go wrong. And I think once you get to that 20-week mark, you never stop being scared and you never stop waiting for the bad news, which sounds really bad. But I just think when you try so hard for something, you can never really relax about it. And it's been like that for most of the pregnancy, like even things where they've, as I said earlier, they've told me to cut things out, and they tell you for the first trimester, don't have baths for some reason. Don't have baths when you have IVF. When you're going through the treatment and in your first trimester, don't have baths. So I haven't had a bath since last July. My sister keeps telling me I think, but obviously I've showered.
Well, I've not had a bath since like 1998, so I must really hum.
I can smell you from here, Dave. I can smell you from here. But it's strange, like the little things, like they say to avoid certain drinks. So I haven't had a fizzy, like, oh, show off with your kind of tango there. All right.
That was bad timing.
Bad timing.
I definitely shouldn't hold up this mocha flavoured beer, then, should I?
Oh, you can keep it. Well, that's the only good thing. I'm so exhausted. I could have caffeine. I'd be desperate for caffeine, but I still can't stand the smell of tea or coffee.
Oh, right.
Like it makes me feel physically sick, but that's really common in pregnancy. But I did say to my husband the other day, I am looking forward to having a coffee. But everyone keeps asking me how excited are you for your first drink, your first glass of wine, because it's been like nearly a year, and I'm like, a glass of wine, I'm going to be off my face off a cup of tea. Like, it's been that long since I've had caffeine, I'm going to be wired. I'm not bothered about the wine. But it is strange that literally anything that they tell you, you get quite rigid with it. Which again was difficult for me, having already established all of these food rules, and some of them then added to that list of, cut this out, cut that out, you can't have this, you can't have that. Whereas others, it was introducing things that I found were really scary to me. So it's been interesting.
You sort of already touched on the answer to my next question, but which was obviously that we've just talked about all of the times of being told it didn't work, like it's not taken. What was that moment like? The confirmation that it had worked.
Incredible. Like you don't believe it, but it's probably the strangest way to ever find out that you're pregnant. Most people pee on a stick. It doesn't happen. And everybody finds that really strange. You're going for a blood test. They tell you not to take a pregnancy test. And you find out just shy of 4 weeks. And I was actually in the gym in our home gym on the treadmill. It was November, and I got the phone call, and they go through all the security checks with you, and you like, okay, like, can you just tell me your name, your date of birth, your address? And the nurse didn't even say you're pregnant. She just went, congratulations. And the feeling, and I immediately started shaking and just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it at all. And I was going, really? Yeah, I've got some things to go over with you. Do you want me to bring you back in 5 or 10 minutes so you can go and tell Andrew? I was like, yes, please, yes. And I ran into the house, and in typical, comedy fashion, he was on a phone call as a partner of the company that he works for, and I burst into the room. It wasn't even a phone call; it was a video call. And I just shouted, "You need to get off the phone now! You need to get off the phone!" And he just went, "Oh, Richard, I need to call you back." And his boss just went, "Oh, okay, that's fine." And he even said he thought I was coming in to tell him it hadn't worked. And both of us just stood there for about 5 minutes hugging because you're in complete disbelief. I mean, poor Richard, when he finally got told in January, I was like, I'm glad that we can finally explain this insane phone call that makes me seem like a lunatic.
Yeah, what was that about? Oh, no, she just found a wasp in the...
But yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. It is funny when, like, obviously you've got that piece of news and you no one, even under normal circumstances, people don't want to say anything for 12 weeks. And you've got to keep it to yourself. And I remember with when you were first going in, I was like, do you want me to ask or not? Like, because if I ask, you've got to answer. And I remember we agreed at the time that you'd just tell me when it happened, rather than me kind of, so that you knew, because I was worried that if I didn't ask, you'd think I didn't care. But at the same time, I was worried that if I did ask and it was a no, and and that's another person you've got to say no to, which sort of loops me round to kind of, I was going to leave this question. How long have you got? Like, can I keep you for a bit more than the hour?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. In that case, well, because I'll move on to some of the. I'll get to the diet culture stuff in a sec as well. Then, because ultimately the question I want to ask links into both of these, which is about basically people's comments and what people say to you. But so, and I know that in both, in like, one of the most common things that every woman over the age of 25 asks is when are you going to have a baby? When are you going to have a baby? And was that the type of thing that obviously as soon as that came through, I'm like, I've not muted those. I can't. We got 45 minutes in without me getting a sound alert come through, and I'm like, as soon as I saw the animation come on my screen, I'm like, crap, I forgot to mute those. But so to anyone who's listening to the podcast and not watching, that was someone new following on Twitch. What are some of the kind of things that maybe we kind of should think twice about saying to people?
I think, one, people need to stop assuming that people want children. That's when are you going to have kids? Well, that's the assumption that people want to have kids.
Yeah.
That's also the assumption that people haven't been trying to have kids. And also the assumption that something hasn't gone wrong. Like all of the people I know who've had miscarriages and struggled with infertility, which is way more common than people think. I know of two people this year who've had miscarriages and just not spoken about it. And I think, as much as I think it should be spoken about, it's also a very difficult thing to talk about. It's very difficult to talk about your own infertility when, when we very first started struggling, one of my best friends announced she was pregnant. So then when is the right time to turn around and say, well, actually, so we waited until she's had the baby, by which point it was a year in. And as soon as we got married, people started asking us when we were going to have kids. So I think, yeah, definitely asking when people are going to have kids. It's as bad as commenting on someone's body. Like,
well, yeah, that
general.
was kind of one of the links I was going to make. My plan initially was to go onto the diet culture stuff before getting to that question, but then my brain decided it wanted to work in a different order, which, well, we all know happens with my brain. So you said obviously it was around the 20-week scan. That was the point at which you're like, okay, we finally kind of accept this now. We're comfortable accepting that. What was that shift like?
Strange. At that point, we had bought nothing. At 20 weeks, we bought nothing. We put our house on the market for sale.
Which you moved like, what, 2 weeks ago or something?
Yeah, about, what was it, 4 weeks ago?
At 34 weeks pregnant, yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting. That was frustrating more than anything. Don't pick up that box, don't move that shit. And I was like, I need to do something. I can't just stand and watch. But yeah, it was like that night we went home and we bought a pushchair, and then we started looking for nursery furniture, and we felt like we could actually start to make plans, like it was real.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a strange shift. Like, again, still very nervous, still very conscious of everything. But it is like all of a sudden you are. I mean, I couldn't have denied that I was pregnant given how fast I showed. I had a bump very, very quickly. So if anything, lockdown helped me in that respect, because we weren't allowed to see anybody, and I managed to hide it for quite a while. That really helped with hiding the morning sickness. That was good. Well, I say morning, the sickness.
Just sickness. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, it's I can't really even describe the shift. But what is strange is I've got a few friends who are pregnant all at the same time, and all of them have had this same mentality, but all of them have had some kind of a struggle. We are pretty much the last ones out of our group of friends to have children. And if I told you that both my best friends and my husband's best friend had their first children by happy accident, and I'm talking, my best friend was 20 weeks when she found out, and his best friend, they just randomly did a pregnancy test because she was in like a really emotional foul mood, and she was almost I think she was about 9 weeks pregnant. So for us to have them to look at, and then for us to take so long, it felt so hard. But I also accept that we're kind of the anomalies. Like, most people, it is your 30s when you start trying to have kids, whereas all of our friends were in their 20s, mid to late 20s. So it's just that different friendship group. But yeah, it's just, it's a nerve-wracking time for anybody. But I think particularly when you've struggled to get there, it's even more special when you feel like you can settle into it a little bit more. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Once you started then talking about it both with like your clients, because I know obviously and on social media and stuff, up until that stage it was all a very closed circle that knew what you were going through. And I know you've used your social medias as a way to kind of to talk about pregnancy and to training during pregnancy, and I think including IVF and everything, right? I think now.
Yeah.
How what's been the reception with that? Like, have you found a lot of people that like you've found a lot of people like, oh, I struggle with this too? You're finding out that more people are glad that you're talking about
and
it.
I've had messages from people as well that have said really lovely, really encouraging things. Just like the fact that you've spoken about your journey has helped me to get through mine, and it's made me question things. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, if you think that you know your body best, you know when something is wrong. So whether you think that the fault is down to you, which when we started all these investigations, and I did think it was my fault, but I couldn't just sit there and just accept, okay, well, this is just the way that it is. You've got to push, and I think that helped a few people to question and to push through themselves. It's given me space and more knowledge to be able to help people who have had questions. So if someone had come to me 2 years ago talking about polycystic ovaries or endometriosis or infertility issues or training through pregnancy, I wouldn't have. I would have known the basics, or I'd have gone to Google. Whereas now, I know a hell of a lot more. And it was through when we first started trying to get pregnant. That was when I decided to do my pre and postnatal qualification. And I did train one of my clients all the way through her pregnancy, and our little boy's nearly 1 now, and that's been absolutely amazing to see. And I've got other clients who I'm sure will have little ones, more little ones. But yeah, the reception's been really positive, and it was never that I was ashamed about it or I wanted to hide it from anybody. It's just such a difficult process to go through. I think if we went through it again, I would be very open about the fact that we're going through it again. But the issue then becomes, as you've said, people asking you about it all the time. And
yep.
I've got no issue or qualm with people asking me questions about the actual process. The problem is when people ask you how it's going and they want an update, and they're doing it because they care, but it feels like so much more pressure when you already have that pressure there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was never anything I was ashamed of. But it was something that I just decided to keep close to my chest until we were. If it hadn't worked, I would still have talked about it. I would still have put it on social media. I would still have gone through it, because I think it's important for people to know. Like I talk about struggling with my food, my eating disorders. It's important because I think, as with everything, the less you talk about something, mental health, the less you talk about it, the less people are going to recognise it and start speaking out, and it's not going to be, no one's going to help, and no one's going to recognise it in themselves or in other people, and we need to start recognising things more and supporting each other more. So that was my biggest take from it, was the positives that came out of it for other people, which was just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many, when you bring up mental health, there's so many parallels in terms of like things like, it's that same double-edged sword of, it's good to know that someone else is going through what you're going through, but it's really shit to know that someone else is going through what you're going through. It's like, you don't want to know, you wouldn't want anyone to experience what you're experiencing, but at the same time, is so much comfort in knowing that you're not the only person experiencing this in the world. And as you've said a bunch of times today, it's like, a lot of these things are much more common than people say. They're not, the amount of people requiring to go through IVF is much more common than people think. The amount of people that have miscarriages is so much more common than people think. It's just, as you said before, people talk about the successful, the success, like that. That's what we talk about, and it's a very, very difficult thing for people to talk about but that makes it even this cyclical thing of it still being more and more difficult for people to talk about. Before we move on to diet stuff, is there anything else you'd like to say about the IVF journey or fertility in general?
As I've just said, I just think if there's something that someone's worried about, if there's something that they're questioning, don't doubt yourself, because you do know your body best, and it doesn't matter if the medical professionals are telling you one thing and you think that they are wrong. Find somebody else to talk to, because chances are, if we'd have just gone with our original hospital, our original consultant, we would still be stuck in that same rut of, we don't know what's going on, we'll find out eventually. I would still be in that absolutely horrendous place mentally. And to be honest, I don't think I would still be married. I think, and that's not as in my husband would leave me. I think you spend so much time blaming and shaming and guilting yourself that you pull away from everybody and everything because you just feel like you've got nobody. So it's just remembering to trust your own gut and remember that there's always someone that you can talk to, whether that is talking to someone like you, Dave, or that's talking to another professional, or it is going on social media and finding people that have been through these journeys and experienced similar things to you that you can talk to. The people that I've spoken to that I've never even met and don't even, I wouldn't know from Adam, but have reached out and asked me something, I'm more than happy to, because if that helps them, then it means that they could be continuing on their journey to whether that's, IVF, eating, whatever. So just, always trust your own gut, always trust yourself.
Yeah, awesome. So, about 40 minutes ago, you said that we've just talked about what's changed in the last 3 years from this point of view, but in the last 3 years, you said as well, you got into personal training with one mindset, and now your mindset is something completely different. What's caused that shift?
Few different things. So I qualified beginning of 2018, and I think when you first go into the fitness industry, PT, you do follow all of the rules. Like, I am going to train everybody like this, and everybody will squat like this, and everybody will deadlift like this, and everybody should eat like this, and everybody will have a and you have this mindset that people go into training because they want to change something. For me, I don't think it took me very long to go, actually, I don't train to change anything about myself. I train because it gives me a mental release as well as a physical release. It makes me feel good. And I do have a lot of, my family, all different shapes and sizes. My cousin, shout out to him, runs a page on Instagram called Fat Athlete, which gets people who are fat out together running because they can, because they want to, but they don't want to do it alone. So he's like, let's all just get together, we'll go for a run. He goes for a swim. He's done flipping open water swims, and I'm like, geez, you're fitter than I am, and he is. He will openly say he's fat, he's overweight, it's whatever you want to call it, because people are scared to use the word fat because they think it's a nasty word, but it's only if you're using it in a negative way. Like, you are fat, you are slim, it is what you are. It doesn't make you a better or worse person. It just is what it is. And I think because I am surrounded, we all are surrounded by people of different shapes and sizes, but because I'm surrounded by that in a fitness capacity as well, all of a sudden I was sick of seeing certain fit scores on Instagram and other social medias chatting shit about calorie deficit and we know who in general I'll be talking about certain, and this is not to generalize, but there's a lot of male testosterone in this one, who has suddenly started to backpedal on some of his messages now that Health at Every Size is coming in and he's been a little bit called out on it. But yeah, I think it is just that platform of that is the way that most people go into the fitness industry. But then I started to find that I didn't like that. I didn't like to follow that. I didn't like to listen. All the podcasts I was listening to, that's not what they were about. And then I started listening to Ben Coomber's podcast. This is how.
Isn't that weird that I'm wearing this as well?
We found each other. Oh yeah, just friends. And I listened to Tally Rye's podcast, who is an amazing advocate for health at every size and fitness, and she's just done a brilliant TED talk on exercise and moving your body to feel good, and the more people you follow with that kind of influence, the more that it's suggested to you. And what's actually happened out of COVID is I've ended up as part of a group called Fitness Professionals Against Waste Stigma, and it's amazing because we are all PT fitness instructors from across the world who would never ever have met or never have spoken if it wasn't for the lockdown. And basically a couple of the girls decided that they wanted to get this community together of people who believe in health at every size, who believe in every size trainers, who want to fight back against the weight stigma within the fitness industry to stop, people feeling uncomfortable going into gyms because they are in plus size bodies, because they think that people are commenting on their bodies or they're making judgments about them, which I'm saying they think. A lot of the time they are. I actually had a client once who told me that she went to a local gym and trained with a trainer, and she stopped working with him because she was doing sessions and he would be telling her what to do and looking at other young slim girls in the gym while he was training her and totally ignoring her and just not invested in her or her journey or anything. I've had sessions where I've stopped the session 10 minutes in and sat with a client for 40, 50 minutes while they've cried about things that are going on at home, or why they've been frustrated about their bodies, or about what, thinking that they're not doing good, because they are self-critical. But that, I think that comes from exercise being a release. It's not just about the physical, it's about the mental, the emotional, everything. And the longer I've been doing it, the more apparent that becomes. And I love what I do not because it changes people's bodies, because it makes people feel good, because it changes their mindset and their outlook. And because I do feel like, people laugh when I say this, you do feel like a bit of a hairdresser in that everybody gets to a stage where they feel so comfortable with you. You will know their problems and you will know what's going on with them. I know all my clients' kids' names. I know how old they are. I know what they're doing every weekend. I don't just finish a session and then say, I'll see you next week, or I'll see you at your next. I get messages off them all the time, constantly. It's about that personal training. It's not impersonal training. So I think when I realised how harmful the industry was to people, and particularly diet culture for me, that's when I sort of flipped where I was going with my business, and it's completely changed in the space of 3 years.
What do you do now if a client comes to you and says that they want fat loss?
I will say I can 100% work with you, but it's more about how you feel in your body. I'm happy to work. I will exercise. I won't give you a diet plan. I'm not a nutritionist. I won't tell you what to eat. And, we all know that what you put into your body has more of an impact than the exercise that you do. So that is something that they are responsible for. But I can help you to move your body in a way that will make you feel good, and it will change. It will change your shape. It will change your strength. It will change, your endorphins. It won't change your endorphins, but it will release endorphins. It will make you feel better. And if you're not moving now and you start to exercise, of course there is going to be that weight loss, fat loss. But if all you want is to lose weight, if that is your main goal, you need to ask yourself why. What do you think is going to miraculously change in your life if you lose weight? And I can understand it from a health perspective completely, because for me, when I lost a lot of weight, I've only got one kidney that works, is fully functioning. So it was always a necessity that I lost weight for my health, because it was putting a lot of pressure on my other kidney. But sometimes weight loss doesn't equal health. It doesn't. And especially when it comes to things like your mental health. For me, it's been, as I said at the beginning, it's been more mentally damaging at points in my life to be slimmer than it was to be bigger. So I think it's always the question of why fat loss, rather than doing it for you to feel good. And usually there is a reason behind that. There is something. It goes back to a comment someone's made, or it goes back to an insecurity, a lack of self-confidence or self-belief. It's never just because because I need to lose weight. I need to lose weight because of this comment or this belief that is founded by something someone has said on social media somewhere. And that's really upsetting. I find it's so damaging. People don't realise that what they say, offhand comments on social media or offhand comments in conversation, even, if you sat with your friends and you're in a slimmer body and you're talking about the size of your thighs and the size of your ass, and you're not even thinking about your friend who is sat next to you, who is wearing clothes that are 6 times bigger than yours, that already feels conscious going out with you, yet you're not making those comments to make your friend feel bad. You're genuinely making them because you're commenting on your own body.
Mm-hmm.
But that makes your friend feel bad. That could even make your friend that is one size bigger than you feel bad. So it is always a question of why, rather than how are we going to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I've had this conversation with Alona a million times, because Alona fat shames herself on a regular basis, and I think you've seen pictures of her. There's not a lot of her. She's not the competitive bodybuilder she once was, but she's always doing it. And I used to kind of say to her, like, if you're kind of sat there saying, "Oh, I'm so fat right now," I'm like, what do you think about me? Like, because I'm like significantly, I'm significantly larger than Alona just by virtue of being me, but I have a significantly higher body fat percentage than she does, but the thing is, it's like, it's not about, it's like, for her, it's not about me. And the kind of the issues I suppose I struggle with this is it's like within the mental health space about, like, comparing trauma. Like, you wouldn't say to a person that, well, you shouldn't complain about your trauma because this person next to you's trauma is bigger. And it's the same as, like, so Alona does she have the right to complain, feel bad about her own body, even though the person sat next to her, it might feel worse about theirs? And it's I think it's another one of those things that kind of stifles the conversations, makes it very difficult to know what can we talk about, what should we be talking about, how even should we be talking about all of these things.
Well, of course, everybody's entitled to talk about their own, but because everybody does have these insecurities. I mean, and I think it's socially acceptable and almost socially, how would you put it? It's like, it's just a given thing that women feel like they socially should do. Like, oh, you look really nice today. Oh, I don't. I look a mess. Like, it's an automatic response. We can't compliment. We can't feel confident in our own bodies because that is wrong. You, as a woman, should consistently put yourself down. You should consistently be saying how, you know, oh yeah, this looks good, but that looks terrible. This looks good. You're never allowed to just feel positive about yourself. And I'm not saying that it's, you know, men don't have their own hang-ups, but I do think there's that little bit, well, it is more pressure on women.
Well, I would absolutely say that. I would say there is increasing pressure on men than there ever was, and about male looks and male expectations now. It's I'd say I would say it's been there with women for decades. And I'd say social media has really brought it to the forefront with men, and it's certainly growing. I know, you know, basically my 16-year-old from the age of 14 was already worrying about how to get a six-pack and things like that. So, whereas the 14-year-old doesn't seem to really care. He just gets 2 cookies and a muffin and squishes the 2 between the other and calls it a muffin sandwich. I know, but yeah, I'd say this, we talk about this a hell of a lot on my show and on the podcast, which is about the idea of accepting compliments. It's conditioned into us. It's conditioned into us to be humble, to not show off, to not brag. And unfortunately, we are very binary individuals in some respects. So when someone says to us, "Don't brag," then that means the opposite is self-deprecate. So that must be what we need to do. And it becomes a conditioned response of like the second. You've definitely heard me talk about it before. If I was to offer you a glass of water or a glass of poison, which one would you accept? It's like, I'd accept the water. Okay, well, if I was to offer you a compliment or an insult, which one would you accept? And most people accept the insult. We don't. When someone insults us, we don't push back against that. We take that to heart. Whereas when someone compliments us, yeah, it's common, and it's common. It's common in men as well. Like I talk to people on a regular basis about accepting compliments. I had to talk to myself about it once upon a time, and now when people compliment me, I'm just like, thanks. And we even have a little no shame policy because I remember how this came up. There's a guy in our community called Beat Cleaver. He's a beatboxer, and I like to just make random noises. Like I just like to, like, it's not beatboxing to his level, but I kind of put myself down and say, yeah, that's not beatboxing, blah blah blah, and all the rest of it. And he was like, you know, look, it is. It's like, at what point is it beatboxing? If you know, it's like you don't have to be of the same level. So we kind of adopted the whole. Not shaming yourself for what you do policy. We've even got a little command, which is exclamation mark no shame, which kind of fills the screen with people saying not shaming. Because of that, because I think it is something that we've learned. It's well, to put it in a personal training term, it's shit squat technique, and like, yeah, that's all I really do. In fact, someone's just done it on the no shame thing on the screen, but. That's all I do now. I used to teach people who had poor squat technique how to squat better, and now I teach people who've got poor talking to themselves technique, the poor mental squat technique, how to mentally squat better. It's like, it's a difference in form of like, so you accept the compliment and you kind of, and it's, once you start doing it, it feels so unnatural at first, but it becomes quite natural, and then it feels less awkward than that whole exchange of someone complimenting your hair. And your hair does look really good today, by the way. Although at first it took me a while to. You've got like a weird earring in, but it's your Bluetooth headpiece. And I was like, what is that thing that keeps on flashing? I'm like, is there something up with the camera? But it's the sneaky Bluetooth headpiece. But headpiece. It's like a full on Bluetooth headgear. But yeah, it's when you kind of have that out where someone says, "Oh, your hair looks really nice," there, and you go, "Oh yeah, well it'll probably look shit again later," or whatever. It's like, or oh, I must have just washed it, or new conditioner, or whatever we put it down to. Is if someone says that, like, yeah, that actually feels awkward, because then you kind of feel awkward that you've got to do that, and then the other person kind of feels awkward because their compliment's just been returned to them. It's like, here's the gift I gave you. Here's your birthday card. No, it's okay. No, it's all right. It's not my birthday till tomorrow. It's like, it's like the same interaction would feel a bit weird. But if you actually say, "Oh, thank you," and then the whole thing moves forward and it's gone in a split second of time. Anyway,
you kind of just touched on my biggest thing about it all. So I've just finished doing an intuitive eating course, because again, and I've openly admitted to people, like, my eating issues have reared their ugly head through pregnancy, and it's nothing other than I'm exhausted all of the time. So the first thing that I reach for is anything with sugar in it, but then I've felt sick and I don't want. So it's been really hard to get the balance with everything, and listening to my body has been really, really difficult. With everybody says, "Oh, pregnancy is a time where it's easiest," and it's really not. It's not at all. If you've ever struggled with an eating disorder, to then suddenly be like, all I want is white bread and strawberry chewy and mustard and salt, the weirdest things in the world, but these are what
all on one sandwich.
All on one sandwich with a little bit of ham mixed in there. Good, we're all good. But then I'm sat there going, I don't want my kids to develop these habits. I don't want this baby to watch me eat and think, why is my mummy doing that? Why is she wearing that? Why is she? Because for me, and I'm not in any way blaming this for me developing an eating disorder, but my mum has been on diet for as long as I can remember.